How is TikTok responsible for billions of dollars in tax fraud?
Why did Dell cop a $10 million fine? And who delivered DoorDash's $2 million fine?
And why is Google search so awful these days?
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Uniden Australia.
Hi there. Welcome back to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the award-winning tech podcast where we dive into the big tech stories of the week. I'm Alex Kidman, and this week, my usual co-host Adam Turner's taking some time off. So I started to search for a replacement host, especially as search is one of this week's key themes. And I landed on one guest who's essentially forgotten more about search than I'll ever know. From Pickr, it's Leigh Stark.
Hey, how did you even find me if Google's not working for you?
I used Ask Jeeves. He's still remarkably reliable.
Oh, at least you didn't use Alta Vista. You would have gotten lost in the mountains on that one.
So, Leigh, for the past few weeks on the podcast, we've been talking about the seemingly imminent Musk Zuckerberg cage fight. And the latest news is that it's off.
Was it
It's
ever
not gonna
technically
happen.
on?
Well, they certainly talked a lot about it. But look, clearly, there's still a grudge here, a beef, if you will. And in certain genres of music, when you have a beef, you record a diss track. And look, that's the last thing we need. And if anyone doubts that, check out what Mark Zuckerberg's sister did to Adele and Twisted Sister. And if you
I,
don't know what I'm talking about,
I don't.
then I'll have to educate Leigh after the podcast is done. The listeners can search that one up themselves. And all I'll say is, whilst it's not my fault, I'm very, very sorry I made you aware of it.
Oh, man.
But if diss tracks are not happening, if cage fights are not happening, Leigh, how would you like to see Musk and Zuckerberg actually settle their differences?
Uh, I've never had to actually think of the answer to this question, but I think I know what it is. Can we tax them to oblivion and make sure their funds actually go to something useful? It feels like they're constantly escaping tax. That's how I'd like to see two billionaires settle their differences by paying their actual way.
What a remarkably sensible idea. It'll never, ever work.
No, it won't. It absolutely won't work. You're right. Speaking of work, one of the parts of working for a living is that most folks recognize really is necessary, but not necessarily loved, which is really coincidental, is paying tax. This week, an unusual tech angle on people using or being dodgy with tax returns emerged. What's that about?
So the story here, weirdly enough, is TikTok. And
TikTok. Sorry, TikTok.
TikTok. So usually when you think of TikTok, you think like cat videos, viral dances, that kind of stuff. I'll admit I am not part of the TikTok generation. It's not really for me. But this week it emerged that huge, huge tax scams are also on TikTok. And when I say huge, we're talking potentially up to $4 billion.
Wait, you said TikTok and not tax talk, right?
Yeah, although TikTok tax scam is really fun to say.
TikTok tax scam. TikTok. I can't say it more than once. Really, I can't even say it once.
It's excellent, but this is not, and this is an Australian story. This is not 4 billion US. This is Australian.
Wow.
And I've got to be really careful in how I describe this because I do not want to encourage anyone to commit tax fraud, and this is tax fraud.
Mm.
But essentially speaking, what the TikTok influencers were encouraging people to do was register Australian businesses through the MyGov portal and then claim that they'd spent like $500,000 on setting this business up. And when you set up a business, buying stuff for your business, whatever your business is, you are allowed to claim the GST back on that. That's part of the way the tax system
Because you
works.
have to be registered for GST to do it, I assume.
You do. But the thing is, what these people were doing was basically saying, oh, I've spent like $500,000, $1 million on setting up my business. Can I have my 10%, 50,000, 100,000, whatever, dollars back now, please? And the
But
influencers were spinning this as a loan from the government. Again, it's not a loan, it's a
what?
tax fraud.
How? But surely they weren't that dumb.
So, Leigh, how can I put this? The
They
reason it's
were.
a $4 billion tax scam, although not all of that was paid out, something like $2.6 billion they blocked. But the reason it's
Oh,
that big a
great,
tax
great. Only
scam,
$2.6 billion of taxpayer funds went to idiots. That's great.
is because there were 56,000 people who did this.
There are 56,000 people dumb enough to try and defraud the government.
Dumb enough or desperate enough.
Yeah, right.
There's certainly a lot of evidence, actually, sadly, that it was a lot of people in very constrained financial circumstances who kind of bought the idea of, oh, well, it's just a loan from the government. It's fine. I'll pay it back eventually once I'm on my feet, that kind of thing. Desperate people
Well,
do desperate stuff, but this
I
was desperately kind of
I
dumb.
I get that, but when does the government loan you money? That I don't think anyone's ever heard of this concept, and to even it feels like the worst type of scam. Like instead of like, you're getting scammed by idiots on TikTok, and I don't want to defame anyone, but they are actually idiots on TikTok recommending that you defraud the government. So what actually happened? Was the ATO tracking them?
Well, the ATO started to get reports of this apparently through some accountants because, people would come in and say, yeah, look, I'm on welfare benefits. But it says here you spent $500,000 setting up a company. Yeah, I did that. And then they leave. Um, and that's and I've got to give credit here actually to the AFR because they've done a lot of the reporting on this story. This is their story, certainly not Vertical Holds. But it also seems to be it feels to me almost like one of those crimes like jaywalking where so many people were doing it at once, it kind of became impossible to police everyone, if you get what I mean.
I don't know. My brother got fined for jaywalking once.
Oh, people do get fined for jaywalking. I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
But let's not kid ourselves. It happens on a much, much greater scale
Oh yeah,
than people
totally.
get fined for. And
And
for
it's
international listeners, yes, jaywalking is illegal in Australia and you can get fined for it.
yeah.
Whether or not you will depends.
I find typically not that this is necessarily a hint, but if you see a police person on at least three of the four corners you're crossing, don't jaywalk because they will almost always stop people who have at those ones. That's my insider tip for not jaywalking. But
You can
it's
always
not.
not jaywalk at all in the
You
first
should
place.
always not
That's
jaywalk at
also
all.
slightly safer, generally.
Absolutely, that's very safe, and there's less chance that you're going to get fined for it. But this is very different. Jaywalking is typically mostly safe for adults, provided they know what they're doing. Defrauding the government is very different.
It is. And look, they have started to fine people. Potentially, some people will go to prison over this. TikTok says it's kind of cooperating with it. But it's one of those, I think, extraordinary kind of convergences of where social media services can enable some really bad stuff.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, you hear a lot about the finfluencers and the
Mm.
risks of things with the ACCC and whatnot because many of them don't have. Well, let's say most of them do not have credit licenses. None of them are actually authorized to give any advice, so they don't even understand what the term compliance probably means. And yet, this is a perfect example of anyone doing anyone giving out this sort of advice would have known this was entirely illegal. So maybe just like how you would never say something illegal in front of a cop, don't do it. That doesn't seem like rocket science.
It doesn't, although now you've made me wonder, are these fin-tokfluencers or tokflinfluencers?
I don't know. I'm just going. I am not a TikTok person. I'm just going to refer to these as tax talk scams from now on. So, Alex, we regularly hear about big businesses in courtrooms. Sometimes there's a legitimate reason. This week we heard about two large businesses, both almost like a Sesame Street thing, beginning with the letter D.
Yeah, D is for don't attempt to do dodgy things with Australian consumers this week.
Yeah,
And
right.
the companies in question are Dell and Doordash.
They both begin with D. D is the letter of today.
It is indeed a lucky letter, or not, although not that lucky for them. So Dell is now $10 million out of pocket after the ACCC got an enforcement against them because what they were doing was advertising bundles with monitors. So you'd buy a computer off them. These days, I guess a laptop, although they do still sell desktops.
Yeah,
And they'd say, hey, why don't you get a monitor with that? And by the way, we'll give you this monitor at $300 off. So, you'd see a $600 monitor with 600 struck through and $300 or whatever. I'm making
that
that
makes
figure
sense.
up, but that's
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that they were doing. There was just one little problem with this, Lee. Just one tiny little problem.
only one.
Yeah, the discounts didn't really exist.
Well, sorry. So, what did the monitor only cost $300
The
in that
monitors were
example?
basically regularly available for the discounted
Oh,
price as
okay,
per the
right.
ACCC.
So they were lying.
Basically, yes,
Yeah.
they were not being honest with Australian consumers. They've admitted as much. They're going to pay the $10 million fine, and they've said they won't do it again. And this, I mean, this to me is one of those things that I feel like I see a lot. Like it's great in this case that the regulator has stepped in, that something has been done.
Mm,
But I see it a lot with a lot of online sales platforms, both those operating within Australia and not.
mm.
That kind of dodgy discount pricing. Hey, you'll get this much cheaper if you buy it now.
Yeah, I mean, you do find this also in store. I remember reading an article about this several years ago about the sneaky psychological things that stores will do, and placing objects in your way and then advertising them with discounts that you can't necessarily verify as being legitimately discounted. I mean, this example it'd be frustrating, particularly during the whole work from home era, because so many people needed monitors, and to be advertised a great monitor at a discount that you feel like you're getting a bargain on, only to find later on that it's not. The $10 million fine is interesting, but it doesn't do anything for those people who basically ripped off in the process.
I believe they may be entitled to something, but I'm not sure on
Oh, they
that.
get a new monitor.
Maybe. The one that I see it a lot with actually is refurbished smartphones.
Mm,
So you'll see like an iPhone 10 or 11, an older model, typically an iPhone because they tend to hold a bit of value a bit
yeah,
longer.
totally.
But you'll see like an iPhone 10 or 11 being sold for $300 to $500 or something like that, and they'll say, "Oh, don't pay $1,500, only pay $300," which looks like it's an amazing saving. And that one, they might even be to I'm not a lawyer, certainly, but they might even be just within the letter of the law because they could make the argument, well, when this was new, it was $1,500.
Mm.
But it ignores the fact, and I think it feels always, whenever I say this, it always annoys me because it feels like it's misleading. Because $1,500 right now would buy you the new iPhone, the actual current, 14
Absolutely.
at the time of recording, iPhone, which is quite a bit different from that iPhone 10 or 11, which has genuinely tumbled in price quite a bit. You're not getting the discount you think you're getting.
No, I mean, I have to hope that consumers are more savvy to this, but based on the fact that we just spoke about people who defrauded the government after watching a TikTok scam, I'm not sure that's actually the case.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a lot of research that suggests that, for example, once people start shopping on certain platforms, Amazon being the one that tends to get researched the most.
Mm.
Once people start shopping, and especially if they've got one of those setups, Amazon Prime shipping, but there's also is it the one that Kmart and a bunch of others do.
Oh, I
There's
know the one you mean.
various,
Yeah.
expedited shipping things. Once you're in those systems, there's a lot of research that suggests that a lot of consumers will just go, well, I'm in this system. It's easy to do. They say it's a bargain. I'll only shop here. They don't do any comparison shopping. And it's the one single tip I can give to anyone listening is if you think you've seen a bargain, just search. And we'll get to search actually.
Boy,
We will get to search.
this episode has so many connected themes.
It does. But search whether or not it's actually a bargain, what the actual real going price is, because recommended retail prices, they're a bit like fuel prices. They change every day.
Recommended retail price is a really weird one, I struggle when I write reviews about it because it almost there are only a couple places that will genuinely charge an RRP, which is typically major department stores. That's roughly it.
Mm,
You know, DJs and Maya are pretty much and Apple. They are places
mm.
that will charge an RRP or an SRP. But the frustrating thing is that that when you get an RRP as a tech journo, it's almost never going to be the actual price. You can find a lot, but we call it street price. So if you hear a
Mm.
journo talk about street price, that's the actual price. That's the price a product actually
That's the
should
price the
be.
market is charging at the time the journalist says it.
Absolutely, yeah, and in it's also different and that's what Alex is alluding to. It's different to the time you're googling it or looking for it or checking the review because we could write a review about a pair of earphones that cost $500 today. By the time you Google it, they could be down to $300, but you are still seeing that suggested retail price of $500 odd, and that's a critical difference for a lot of people. You won't realize that when you go on a place like Amazon necessarily or back at those department stores, and that is also how they make that little bit extra money for you. So Alex's suggestion of look around is vital. Don't stay within the ecosystem. Just because you see a discount on there from its original price doesn't mean it's the best price.
Absolutely. And now, sticking with our letter of the day, which is D, we've also got DoorDash. Now, DoorDash did not get a fine from the ACCC. It got one from the ACMA, and it
Right.
didn't get one because it was overcharging for that falafel you ordered last night, Lee.
I ordered a kebab from them a few weeks ago, but yeah, go on.
They actually got fined $2 million by the ACMA for more than 1 million spam messages.
Oh wow. Okay, I feel like I was part of this suit without realizing it.
You're not necessarily getting a free kebab out of them, unfortunately,
Ah,
Lee.
what a shame. But I can understand the problem. I mean, this is a huge issue. Spam just won't go away. I mean, we get it from everywhere. Our inboxes are flooded. Everyone's, not just journos. Journos have a tire fire of an inbox. That's why I don't even bother, clicking read all on mine, much to my wife's hatred of it. But spam is a huge issue from local players, and yeah, I can understand the problem there. How many people had to complain to get this through into ACMA?
Well, it's actually two different groups of people. This is the
Wow.
interesting thing. So it's almost an even split of about 500,000 and change from people who wanted to unsubscribe from getting DoorDash emails and solicitations to
Yeah.
get that kebab. And then the other half were potential drivers who were getting SMS messages saying, "Hey, could you deliver Lee's kebab? He's
Wow.
kind of hungry."
Wow. I didn't
So it
expect
was
the
both
last
sides
one.
of the business equation. Yeah.
Wow, I wouldn't expect the last one, but I can imagine that would really annoy people, especially if there are like five drivers all turning up to get the same meal, because that affects their actual pay packet in the end.
Yeah, and I suppose it's also, again, getting back to what we were talking about, sign of the economic times and so on. You would have some people who may have been
Mm.
kind of more pressured into thinking, well, I'd really better do this. I need a few extra dollars. We are living in more constrained times. But yeah, we have a spam act, and DoorDash contravened it. They went too far.
It's kind of crazy to me that a service that delivers food got hit with a spam act. I know spam's not technically food, but you could see kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah, look, I suppose somebody's probably ordered spam delivered through one of these delivery services. I don't know if DoorDash
Well,
does
if not that, then
supermarket
maybe
delivery stuff.
then egg and bacon spamity spam.
Spam, spam. Absolutely. And now I also have to point out, because this always comes up, people will say, "Oh, but hang on, I don't like this. A, what can I do? And B, why do I get political stuff when there's an election or a referendum or anything
Mm.
coming?" We'll get to what you can do, but I'll quickly just point out, unfortunately, political speech is not part of the Spam Act. So any and every registered political party can inundate your phone with messages you don't want, and they're actually allowed to do it.
And that explains the United Party getting through everyone's
They
spam
were
filters.
the example of the last election, and
Yeah.
possibly of the next one. I suppose as and when we come to the next referendum, we'll see a bit of this as well. Although that might not follow unless there are political parties that particularly take a position. But you can imagine which ones are going to take which
So
position without
So,
necessarily
so
getting
what
into
you're
that.
basically saying is DoorDash, Uber Eats, they basically just need to start a political party.
That would be one way around it. But you mentioned earlier, Lee, that you don't kind of clear your inbox or whatever. And I know a lot of people wonder about whether or not it's worth hitting up, for example, the unsubscribe um, feature within those kind of spammy emails. And I was curious as to your thoughts about whether or not that's valuable or not.
Um, Sometimes I actually think that inboxes that have the automatic "Can I unsubscribe for you" do a better job of it. But it does. I mean, I know legally companies, once you request them, are supposed to remove you, but it doesn't always happen. Sometimes when you unsubscribe from a service, they'll also throw it to a junk folder automatically for you. I think throwing it to a junk folder is more reliable. If you can, do both. At least you know the junk folder's going to do its job. But if you can unsubscribe, even better, because the reality is, if you don't want to be on someone's list, your number there is basically just propping up their marketing numbers. So if you don't want to become part of that, unsubscribe, and then they technically have an obligation to get you out of it.
Yeah, I always have a concern, especially with more international groups, that I'm potentially verifying an email address when I click on their unsubscribe thing.
I mean, that's true, and there are issues with scams that are kind of like that. The idea that you automatically respond, therefore you're automatically verifying that you exist. But I don't think that's in your control. So unsubscribe if they keep sending it to you. Aside from it being illegal, throw it to junk. I mean, there's nothing you can do to stop them.
This is true. This is true. Getting a little bit kind of inside journalism here. There's a US PR representative for what we shall call the adult entertainment
Oh
industry.
gosh, yes, him.
Yes, and Leigh knows who I'm talking about
You
here.
don't even have to say his name, and I know who you're talking about.
And he's very persistent. And look, I'm not casting any kind of moral judgment. I just don't cover that market. It's something I have zero interest in getting press releases about. Some of the titles are just very out there. I'll say that.
Yep.
But he just keeps on coming. I've actually sent requests to say, hey, this just isn't my market. It's a waste of your PR budget. Just don't. And it if you'll forgive the phrase, it keeps on coming.
Oh gosh, you had to go there.
So, Leigh, Google has nearly become a verb. We often talk about Googling something in terms of searching it, but a lot of people, myself included, come forth with the same complaint over and over again recently. Google search appears to be getting a whole lot worse.
Is this the Kenya thing?
Look, this can be the Kenya thing. We can start with the Kenya thing. The Kenya thing was something I wrote up this week. For people going, Kenya? What? Google sort of didn't think that Kenya existed.
It's not its fault, but I understand why it did that. But yes,
So I'm going to argue it is its fault, but I need to explain this to our listeners. So, at the time I wrote this piece, I don't know because I haven't checked it at the time we're recording. If you did the search specifically for country in Africa that starts with K,
I'm going to do this search while we're recording.
Yep, Leigh's going to do this search while we're recording. You would get a response. You get a snippet, I believe.
And it's still not corrected.
Right. Okay. So it's still the wrong snippet.
It's still the wrong snippet.
I say the wrong snippet. I'm going to read it out here.
So most people who listen to the show know that there is a country in Africa that starts with K. It's Kenya, clearly.
Yeah, it's clearly Kenya. However, the snippet that Google chooses to surface is, while there are 54 recognized countries in Africa, none of them begin with the letter K. The closest is Kenya, which starts with a K sound, but is actually spelled with a K sound.
Which makes no sense whatsoever, right?
Yeah, is Google drinking meth here? What's going on?
Can you drink meth? This is news to me. The next thing I'm going to type into Google is, can you drink meth?
Don't do tax fraud and don't drink meth.
Yeah, I'm clearly going to type both of those into Google and get myself on several lists with one search. So what's going on here is that Google has a part of it. Google's got lots of processors, and a lot of what makes Google work is some AI. There's a few different systems. So for folks who don't know, aside from being a journalist, I'm also an SEO, and that means we kind of get exposed to a lot more search analysis than most people. So Google has these AI systems that help it. There's one called BERT, there's another one called MUM. They do different things. There's a whole bunch of others, and they all kind of work together. And what Google is basically a comparative indexing system. The easy way of explaining that is it looks at a whole bunch of websites, scrapes information, tries to work out which is the best related to the query you're typing in. And a query like this popping up the snippet's like the best answer it can find. That's why this is kind of ridiculous. The best answer it can find is often the one that more closely matches the query. And unfortunately, in this one, the result that more closely matches the query, which is completely fake, well, not fake, but a lie.
Nonsense.
Nonsense is the word I'm looking for. Is on a website called Emergent Mind, and it's created from ChatGPT. And the ChatGPT stuff that it comes from a joke from Reddit. So basically,
which we won't run into here because
we won't run into here.
Moderately family-friendly podcast.
It's not a good joke anyway. But ChatGPT, being an AI system, that's why this whole thing gets really murky. Scrapes a whole bunch of sources online and tries to reform them into logical information, and it doesn't always work. AI is only as good as what you feed it, and often then not even quite that good. Has some great purposes, not always perfect, especially in its infancy, which is where it is right now. This example of country in Africa that starts with K, a website has run a whole bunch of ChatGPT things and just automatically created posts. We call it spinning, and has, as you can see, as you heard from the thing, created a completely incorrect answer. The problem is, and why Google sources this out, is that it is still the query or still the website that more closely matches the query. That's the problem.
So, okay, I've got a problem here, and I'm going to jump straight in with it. I get what you're saying, and I know that this is how Google works. What you have described is the way Google works, in a sense, the way Google thinks.
Yeah, mostly. In fact, we actually know it's kind of trying to emulate the human brain. Sometimes it gets it completely wrong.
Well, this is what the point I was going to get to. Anyone putting that search in innocently is not looking for the direct match to that. They're actually looking to see if there are countries other than Kenya that start with K in Africa.
You're
And
right.
it absolutely fails utterly to resolve that intent, which I think is actually the intent of people putting that in beyond people listening to this podcast and people into obscure Reddit jokes.
The problem is, and this happens a lot actually, with every algorithm change or every algorithm tweak that Google applies, intents change, and often not to the point where people necessarily agree with Google. That creates a lot of frustration for SEOs. I'm going to just there's a lot of good SEOs out there doing really good work, and there's some even great people from Google that like John Weller. If you go look on Twitter and Mastodon, he's a perfect example of someone who can usually explain this
Go
sort
look
of.
on Mastodon.
Go look
That's
at
all I'm
Mastodon.
saying.
Don't look on X. That's a different hellscape. But go look at Mastodon. John Weller is more. He's not a. He's someone who works at Google and is pretty direct about explanations. Seems to be a lovely guy. We talk about music there. He seems cool. So the problem with intent is that it changes often, frustratingly. Some intents are informational. Some become commercial. Some are navigational. And in this example, it seems like the intent on this one that Google has modified is kind of about explanation. And I kind of understand why it thinks that intent is correct, simply because that Google's experimenting more with AI, and that's what we're getting.
I would have liked to think Google was smarter than this particular mess of response.
It should be. You're not wrong. I can see how it's created. I can see why it threw to this one. What I don't understand from as an SEO perspective is why this one outranked the more interesting information from, say, Worldometer, which actually clearly says Kenya in its list, or even from a Wikipedia thing, it says countries in Africa and it lists K. And the thing suggesting that perhaps Google's analysis is a little bit broken at the moment is that if you look at countries in Africa in that list and you pop up Wikipedia, which is about the fifth entry, it starts showing lists of G, not K. It's completely missing that. And that suggests to me something slightly wrong. What we've noticed a lot over the past few weeks is there's a ton of tremors from Google. And the general theory right now is this has to do with what Google is testing in America, the generative AI stuff it has as part of the new search experience.
So I was going to get onto this because it was being reported this week that, actually, Google and Amazon, and I want to look at these slightly differently, albeit only briefly, are using AI.
We could talk for hours on this.
Are using AI to summarize and to categorize articles. And I'm presuming this is what you're kind of talking about.
It's partly. I mean, so Google has AI as part of you. If you launch it in America, and if anyone in Australia wants to try this, grab a VPN like TunnelBear, tunnel through to the US, grab your Google account, go to labs.google, and turn on search generative experience, and then ask a question. And you'll get Google's AI to pop up with mostly American-related stuff. It hasn't officially launched in Australia or New Zealand yet, and it will pop up with answers to questions almost like you're talking to an AI. It doesn't get it always right. It is very much in beta, which is the reason why Australia doesn't have it yet. But a lot of what it's doing is trying to summarize several websites, much like how there was another search engine that died earlier in the year, beginning of the end, I can't remember, Neva or something like that. It tried to do something similar. The idea was to use AI to give you a quick answer that looked at several things at once. That's what Google's SGE is supposed to do, or I think Search Generative Experience is the official name for it. And that's what your thing right now is supposed to do as well. The idea is to basically analyze and summarize websites, I think was the story. And they're already kind of doing that.
Well, I mean, snippets is sort of cutting bits out of websites already.
Yeah, but also look for a review. I mean, people don't really look for this, but look for a recent Alex, what's a recent review you've done that I can find for Alex Reviews Tech? What's a recent review?
The Moto G53 5G.
Okay, great. So we're Moto G53 5G, and obviously if I search for Alex Reviews Tech Moto G53, you become the featured snippet. But one of the interesting things, if you start scrolling down in that, and the first few you find are, even from friends like Fergus over at Reviews, you find a pros and cons list. One of the interesting things about that is that pros and cons list almost never comes from the actual pros and cons list on the website. It's using AI to take information from your paragraphs and create that for you. It's been doing that for well over a year. I know because some of the pros and cons it creates for my reviews aren't aren't actually positive and are part of my list. So,
Which as an author I hate on two
yeah,
levels.
yeah.
One, I don't want my review misrepresented. Please
Mm.
go and read my review to get the actual review. But obviously, also, there's this kind of race to the bottom of AI spinning out articles and then Google working off those and genuine reviews, but also reducing the market for those articles, which, as the buggy whip manufacturer in this argument, I don't like because ultimately it will stop the commercial viability of those services. At which point, isn't everyone worse off because suddenly we've got nothing but this AI spun rubbish?
Yeah, I mean, yes, the answer is yes, but AI presumably will get better. AI is going to get a lot worse in instances as well, and Google has some pretty interesting comments to say that people can be using AI to create content. They should be telling people, but they shouldn't use AI to create content by itself. It should still be created by regular people, and the whole thing is geared on the idea is you should know what you're talking about. But there's actually a comment literally by John from the other day basically saying if you create AI content just simply by AI, it probably not be very good because it comes from other places. The it's the whole thing with search is it's supposed to summarize so people get a better result. But I will tell you that Google does some kind of sketchy things even outside of the obvious mistake where some of the search results can look better. SEOs can do really cool things, or they used to be able to because Google changes them. And there's little reason as to why they change them, except for when you start looking at AdWords, you start to realize, oh, of course, they make money out of AdWords. So the better you make your search result look, the less they might make from AdWords. So it's a lot. It's a little bit. It'll seem like I'm jumping all over the place. It's a devil you know versus a devil you don't. You can prevent Google from looking at your website, but no one will because Google is the most commonly used search engine. So
It
most
is the way that things are found.
it is, and until that changes, you kind of just have to work with it and hope that you can make it better. The critical thing is it is a comparative search engine, so the more people do the right thing, the better it gets. That's how this works. So if you keep writing great content like Alex and myself, speaking modestly, of course, if you keep writing great content, then that theoretically also trains the engine to be better. In the query of country in Africa that starts with K, if anyone at this point, Alex, if you publish a story about this and
I
flag
believe I
the
did.
and flag
I
you
pointed
have,
out to Google that Kenya existed.
and we just have to push it up. We have to feed some links back to Alex's site and prove him that he is a because there's a lot to this. You have to
I don't
prove
wish
that
to be an authority on the existence
you don't
of
want to be
African countries, by the
you
way.
don't
That might be
want
a bit of a problem with this,
but
with this idea.
if you were the authority at that point, you could actually take over that position, and that's the critical thing. But again, another point, you can tell Google when they're doing something wrong, and they will work on fixing it. They're actually pretty open about that. And again, the person to talk to is that guy I mentioned on Mastodon, John Weller.
Right. Well, I did want to mention Amazon in this argument as well, because what they're doing in the States again only,
Mm,
and apparently only for some categories and some products, is they're doing AI generated review summaries. So if you go to any Amazon product, down the bottom, you'll have all the customer feedback stuff, all the customer reviews. And it's basically doing this kind of mishmash thing of the reviews for products to give you a quick summary of what people have said. Customers said the screen was good.
mm,
Customers said it caught fire, whatever. Um, I see lots and lots of problems with this because Amazon reviews are just gamed to heck. Uh,
yeah,
the reporting on it seems to suggest that it's very, very accentuated towards the positive. Big shock there because, of
no
course,
shock.
Amazon wants to
They're
sell
trying to sell
products.
products. Yeah. I don't I don't like the idea of this thing, but I understand why they're doing it because the reality is quick sells work better than slow sells, and if you have someone read through the 10 pages of terrible reviews on the projector that you want to buy, they're not going to buy it on Amazon at all. I don't think I'm a huge fan of this, but the problem is, and it's very similar to the whole Google logic, is it's its own ecosystem. We don't really have a. If you want to go buy an Amazon and Amazon has this system rolled out, there is little recourse. It's their own ecosystem. They can do what they want, and that is a problem. So here's your logic. Don't search Amazon for reviews of products. Trust trusted tech journalists. Or not
Actually,
just yeah.
I've just worked out there is exactly one product on Amazon that I desperately want to see the AI generated review of.
All right.
And you might not be aware of this one, Leigh. Some of our listeners might, and I think I might have even mentioned it on the podcast before, albeit maybe hundreds of episodes ago. The Hustler Banana Slicer.
The Hustler banana slicer.
So this is a
wait, from Hustler, the company that makes
no,
the mag?
no. This is not an adult product in any way.
Because the banana
I think
slicer
it's got a
has
Z in there. And I might be mispronouncing it
because the
slightly.
Hustler banana slicer from Hustler Mag would be
But
very
that's,
different.
Very Jewish, yes.
Yeah.
But this is
Mazel
a
tov.
banana-shaped slicer. Think of like a mandolin, so it's got like little wires in the middle.
This is not making the Hustler banana slicer any easier on my eyes.
Absolute rubbish, garbage product. But if you look it up on Amazon, customers have gone nuts having fun with the reviews of this thing. I will put a link to this on the Vertical Hole page.
Oh,
So
Hustler.
Hustler, yes, sorry. I did say I was
So
mispronouncing
Google
it.
actually did correct me on that one.
Right. The reviews are fantastic because it's like people have written like noir fiction and this banana slicer saved my marriage and all this just absolute nonsense. But it's
take you
glorious.
like 3 seconds to cut those slices into a banana
And
using
of course,
a butter knife.
It's a stupid product. Nobody should buy it. I'm not saying they should buy it, but I want to see what all of the nonsense on that review. Like it's pages and pages. It's been around. I think I first became aware of it like a decade or more ago. That there was just this incredibly funny page on Amazon. I want to see what the AI does with that because there's such a discordant amount of nonsense in there that I think it'll quite possibly blow up Amazon's AI.
Yeah, this is very much like the IT crowd thing where you Google and it explodes, right? If they were to try and turn all 7,085 ratings into something amazing,
it might also be the most rated product on Amazon. It's quite possible.
Probably. This is now on your Christmas wish list. If you get a Hustler banana slicer, that might be my fault, Alex. I apologize.
Well, that just about wraps up this week's episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Leigh for filling in for Adam this week.
No worries. Your banana slicer's in the mail.
Fantastic. Now, we don't do the 3 questions of doom anymore, you'll be glad to know, and you don't have to answer questions about Star Trek Voyager and why Babylon 5 is superior, but...
I never would. I would say Voyager's superior, but I would give you an Enterprise answer just to annoy you.
Of course you would. You do still get the chance to promote whatever you like, a website, an app, a lasagna recipe, up to you, as well as where folks can find you both on the web and on the social media of your choice. Go.
An app? Do I dare do it? I make a budget app if you want to check it out called Simple Saver. It's on the App Store and I'm working on it for Android. But you can find me on Mastodon and the website formerly known as Twitter at Lilo, and both of them Leighlo.
And as always, you can catch us at the Vertical Hold webpage on Facebook, Instagram. You can look up Adam or myself on Mastodon, Blue Sky, or Threads. Oh, and X. Remember X? Apparently, it's
the website formerly known as Twitter. It makes the most sense.
That's the one. The artist formerly known as Twitter, perhaps bringing my Prince fandom into it.
The artist formerly known as Musk.
Musk is an artist of a certain kind, but I won't say what, just to keep it polite. But I will be polite and thank everyone for listening in. Thanks for listening to the show. Don't forget to drop us a line and tell us what you think about the show. Tell us what you think about Google search or Dell or Doordash copping fines. Let us know what you love, let us know what you don't, and let us know what we could do better in 2023.
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Uniden Australia.